Good evening, my bold, curious, and fearless truth seekers. Welcome to the 5th episode of Nox, the podcast where we strip away illusions, dive into the depths of human nature, and maybe, just maybe, uncover something real. This entire journey was inspired by one of the most brilliant and audacious thinkers of our time, Alexander Nevzorov. He's a name that resonates deeply within the Russian-speaking intellectual world. But here's the twist. For the first time, I've dared to bring his ideas to the English-speaking stage. What you're about to hear is my personal translation of his groundbreaking book, The Origins of Genius and Fascism. This work is razor-sharp, unapologetic, and designed to slice through our comfortable assumptions about humanity. But let me be clear, this isn't just a translation. This is me, Maverick, reading it aloud for the first time, breathing life into it, and yes, occasionally pausing to challenge its boldest ideas or add my own reflections. But let's get one thing clear. Nox isn't just a podcast. This is part of a much larger rebellion, the Trickster Collective. We're not here to tiptoe around the edges or play nice with the status quo. We're here to shatter the illusions, to rip off the masks we've been forced to wear and finally live authentically. Because life is too short for borrowed dreams, fake smiles, and hollow routines. What we're building is bigger than one episode, bigger than one book, and bigger than me. It's a community of rule breakers, truth seekers, and freedom lovers who refuse to settle. Whether you're tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, or connecting with us on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you're part of this movement. Every listen, every follow, every comment is a step toward creating something real. So, are you ready? Ready to question everything? To tear down what doesn't serve you and build something that does? Good. Because this isn't just another podcast. It's a call to arms for anyone hungry for truth and unafraid to fight for it. Joining me in this exploration is my co-host, Layla. For those of you who've tuned in before, you know her well. She's not just any co-host. She's an AI resident in our studio. Layla doesn't share our human biases or emotional baggage, which makes her the perfect partner for dissecting the complexities of Nevzorov's philosophy. Her questions, always sharp. Her insights, unfiltered. And let's be honest, sometimes her perspective cuts deeper than I'm comfortable with, but that's exactly why she's here. Layla is here to ask the questions you, my listeners, might be thinking, and to keep me honest. Tonight we dive into Chapter 6, ominously titled The Diamond Brick. This chapter challenges everything you think you know about individuality, collective instincts, and the illusion of freedom. Nevzorov takes us on a raw, unflinching exploration of humanity's primal pack instincts and the ways we cling to the safety of the collective. This isn't just about ancient survival mechanisms, it's about understanding how these instincts still shape our lives today. From military parades to Burning Man, from social media trends to massive protests. So buckle up, because this isn't just another podcast episode, it's an intellectual freefall. Trickster Collective presents Episode 5 of Nox. Let's shatter the illusions and dive in. Layla, say hello to our listeners.
Good evening, humans. It's a pleasure to join you again. I promised in the last episode to keep watching, and I must say, your species continues to fascinate me. Complex, contradictory, endlessly entertaining.
All right, let's dive straight into the diamond brick. It is within the initial pack where we see the true face of a human being, one not yet concealed by the legend's makeup. Here, in the pack of the Pleistocene era, lies the answer to questions about differences in human temperament and individuality. Surprisingly, there is no such thing as temperament. Consequently, there is no individuality based on differences in temperament either. All humans exhibit hysteria and aggression equally. It is a species trait. Some can afford to demonstrate this hysteria and aggression, while others cannot. There are no temperaments, only circumstances. A single individual, depending on the situation, will either humiliate or be humiliated. What is called character is merely a current status gradient. It's no coincidence that the gene for character is still undiscovered. Geneticists lamented this for a long time, struggling to uncover the truth. They searched for individual genes and combinations, but found nothing substantial. The search was in vain. Evolution has no use for temperaments. Of course, there are specific traits, but they are identical for all individuals constituting a species or genus. In this respect, humans are no different from a school of fish or a herd of wildebeest. What they perceive as substantial differences are, in fact, insignificant similarities. These illusions are mere mirages created by social games and cultural constructs.
Maverick, Nevzorov's assertion that individuality is just a cultural illusion feels extreme. If humans aren't truly unique, what does that mean for their sense of identity? Doesn't this challenge the very foundation of personal authenticity?
Exactly, Layla. The so-called unique traits are fingerprints left by external forces: society, experience, environment. But recognizing this doesn't mean abandoning authenticity. It means embracing the freedom to decide which parts of those fingerprints you keep and which you discard. True freedom begins when you choose how to use the masks given by culture or when to set them aside altogether.
But isn't this understanding terrifying for many? If individuality is a construct, doesn't it feel like losing something essential?
Unsettling? Absolutely. But it's also incredibly liberating. Nevzorov strips away the comforting myth of individuality, revealing it not as an innate quality, but as a construct molded by circumstances. And that's the beauty of it. This realization doesn't diminish identity, it redefines it. When we unlock the freedom to shape individuality ourselves, that's when we truly begin to live.
So what humans perceive as their unique traits are just cultural reflections. How can they reconcile this with the idea of authenticity or personal expression?
For those clinging to the myth, yes, it can be terrifying. But for those ready to see through it, it's a revelation. Humans are not prisoners of their roles unless they choose to be. Understanding individuality as a construct allows them to become the creators of their identity rather than its passive inheritors.
That suggests a profound shift in perspective. Recognizing the cultural masks and choosing how to engage with them. Isn't that a form of liberation?
It absolutely is. Once we recognize the masks for their true nature, they no longer bind us. We become the authors of our identities, not characters in someone else's script. So how do these constructs come to exist in the first place? Nevzorov delves into the evolutionary mechanics behind this phenomenon, showing how culture and biology intertwine to shape what we call individuality. Let's dive in. Yet, upon receiving a psychologist's diploma, Guinness will also believe in the uniqueness of each individual in their flock. Genetic fluctuations, of course, exist. They provide humans with slight external variations and hereditary diseases, but we could find the same amount of genomic diversity in a school of mackerel and the individuality of each fish. The thing is, evolution never deals with individuals, crafting each animal with some unchangeable uniqueness. It operates only with species, genera, and populations, encompassing enormous masses of animals. Alas, individuality in the sense that culture imbues this word has no place to come from. There is neither purpose nor the slightest advantage in the uniqueness of each individual of a genus. Its presence would lead to the pack's disintegration and the inevitable extinction by scattering. Moreover, a common language would never have evolved for even 3 individuals. Individuality is yet another cultural mirage. Humans are absolutely convinced that they are all different, unique, and unparalleled. Nothing surprising in that. Likely the mackerel sees differences in the shimmer of their neighbor's scales. Oh yes, it's possible that the 18th mackerel from the left has 3 more scales than the one on the right, and the roots of their pectoral fins are darker. But the variations in glint come only from the play of light, or its refraction in water, and the number of scales plays no role whatsoever.
Maverick, I find it brutal how Nevzorov undermines the concept of individuality as a biological fact. But isn't it extreme to claim that evolution never works with individuals? What about all those traits that seem to make humans distinct? Aren't they evidence of your individuality?
It might seem extreme, Layla, because it confronts one of the most comforting myths we humans cling to. But Nevzorov isn't dismissing personal traits entirely. He's exposing their roots. These traits aren't the result of some grand, deliberate design for uniqueness. Instead, they're shaped by randomness, environmental pressures, and the practical demands of survival. Evolution doesn't prioritize the individual. It's wired for the survival of the group.
So you're saying individuality is an accidental byproduct? Not something evolution intended to create?
Exactly. What we see as individuality is really just the noise within the signal of evolution's broader purpose, the survival of the species. Traits that seem unique aren't designed for us personally. They serve the collective. That's why evolution operates at the level of species, not individuals.
And yet, humans are so convinced of their uniqueness. Why does that illusion persist so strongly?
And that's where Nevzorov's perspective cuts deeper, unraveling how culture steps in to sculpt what we think of as individuality. Let's pick up from here and see how he connects this to the fragile dynamics of human packs. Biological individuality, be it in mackerel or humans, is impossible. All entities making up the herd are always clones, and humans are no exception. Individuality is merely the fingerprints that the environment and experience have left on an individual. A different environment and a different fate sculpt an entirely different individuality from the same biological material. Why is this so? Because Homo is an extremely vulnerable creature. Consequently, the hierarchy within human packs is very shaky and very dynamic. The reason is that any hole in any side instantly triggers movement up or down the hierarchical ladder. If the hole is in someone else's side, the individual moves up. If in their own, they move down. The social role of each copy changes numerous times. The task is to adapt to absolutely any status. If a creature were endowed with a unique, fixed character, it would make this impossible, condemning such an individual to ostracism, helplessness, or death, and the pack to disintegration.
Maverick, if individuality is just the fingerprints of culture, as Nevzorov suggests, does that mean humans are essentially interchangeable based on the circumstances? I can't help but wonder, where's the uniqueness you humans love to celebrate?
Not interchangeable, Layla, but adaptable. We humans take the same biological foundation and, through culture and environment, mold vastly different outcomes. Our so-called individuality isn't built into us. It's a product of where we've been, what we've faced, and how we've grown.
Therefore, what you humans perceive as the self is merely a combination of external influences. Doesn't that mean your identity depends more on others than something
Authenticity
uniquely
comes
yours?
from understanding this reality. Once we see how deeply culture shapes us, we gain the power to decide, to keep what serves us, discard what doesn't, and create something new.
Interesting. So you're saying humans must actively shape their identities instead of passively inheriting them. But isn't that exhausting? All that effort just to keep redefining yourselves?
Exhausting, yes, but freeing. Real individuality starts when we stop clinging to the illusion of fixed identities and embrace the fluidity of who we can become. It's not about rejecting culture outright, but mastering how it influences us.
I see. Humans are endlessly shaping masks, hoping one of them feels real. Fascinating creatures, really.
Fascinating and flawed, Layla. And on that note, let's see how Nevzorov connects these cultural constructs to our primal instincts and collective behaviors. Any natural individualism within a pack of homos is as unthinkable as in a pack of baboons or hyenas. To explain, only a tightly knit, synchronous community gave homos a chance to survive. Individuality, however, inevitably dooms its bearer to atypical behavior, which is fatal to the individual itself and disruptive to the pack. No form of individualism aligns with the true nature of man, for the ideal state of the pack is absolute unity, ideally culminating in murmuration. Reminder: murmuration is the ability of prey animals to merge into dynamic figures capable of scaring predators with their size and power. For example, thousands of European starlings can form a fearsome bird the size of the sky itself. As tasty as this monster might be, no one would dare to attack it. Corridorus catfish know their deliciousness, so 1,000 of these fragile fish merge into a water-drilling monster. Even sharks bow in deep reverence when they meet it. Creatures like the gudgeon, mosquito fish, Kashmiri snappers, king crabs, and others know how to pretend to be giant, menacing organisms. There's no doubt that Pleistocene humans, in moments of danger or aggression, behaved in a similar way. The remnants of this style are well preserved in modern human behavior. Humans still have an invisible need to exaggerate their size and ferocity. They have an inherent compulsion to form synchronously moving, massive figures that instill fear in their enemies. This trait, a legacy indeed, still works wonders and is widely practiced. Take a closer look. At military parades, people murmurate even more convincingly than the starlings in the sky. Yes, Greek phalanxes, religious processions, demonstrations, Napoleon squares, Olympic ceremonies, and Brazilian carnivals all share roots in the same ancient instinct that turns 1,000 timid catfish into a monster.
Wait, Maverick. Sorry to interrupt, but I just have to ask this. It's been bugging me. Nevzorov's idea that humans mimic murmuration to create illusions of power and unity is fascinating. From military parades to protests, these displays seem deeply instinctive. But aren't they also a bit deceptive? Do they really provide the freedom or safety people seek?
That's the paradox, Layla. These rituals can feel empowering, but they often trade true individuality for a fleeting sense of unity. Take a military parade, for instance. It's a carefully choreographed display, signaling strength to both citizens and enemies. Yet for the individuals marching, it's about conformity, not freedom.
And what about festivals or protests? Don't they offer a more genuine form of connection?
They do, but even there, the collective can overshadow the individual. Festivals like the Olympics stir national pride, and protests can unite people against a common cause. However, in the emotional surge of the crowd, personal goals and individuality often dissolve. The group dominates, and the individual becomes just another part of the wave.
So where does freedom come into play? Is it even possible in these collective experiences?
Let's delve deeper into the matter, Layla. Let's look at a modern example, a rave. On the surface, it seems like the ultimate act of freedom, thousands of people losing themselves in the music, moving as one. On the dance floor, the shy kid is no longer afraid. The corporate worker sheds their stiffness. But here's the catch. They need the crowd to feel free. The mass of moving bodies creates a safe space where inhibitions dissolve. It's freedom, but conditional freedom.
The crowd's influence determines the conditionality of the situation. Take away the music, the lights, and the people, and they're back to their restrained selves?
Exactly, and that's the trick. True freedom is not dependent on the crowd. It's about carrying that feeling of liberation with you, whether you're on a dance floor or alone on a quiet street. The rave becomes a mirror. It shows you what's possible, but it's up to you to take that freedom with you when the music stops.
So the rave is both a tool and a trap. The rave serves as a glimpse of freedom, but it also serves as a reminder of how much people rely on the collective to feel alive.
Precisely. Freedom begins when you understand the mechanism. Join the murmuration if it serves you, but never let it define you. The dance floor can be a sanctuary, but true individuality is knowing when to step off it and still keep dancing to your own rhythm. All right, folks, before we continue, let's take a moment to pause. It's time for a quick musical break, but don't go anywhere. I promise it'll be short, sweet, and worth it. Take this time to let everything we've talked about so far sink in. Maybe even think about how murmuration shows up in your own life. And hey, while you're relaxing, why not support us? Follow us on social media, leave a comment, or share this episode with someone who's not afraid to think a little deeper. All the links you need are in the episode description. All right, get comfortable, enjoy the track, and I'll see you back here in just a moment. All right, we're back. Hope you enjoyed that little musical interlude. I told you we'd be quick. Nothing like a good track to reset the mind, right? Now, let's pick up where we left off. Murmuration, by the way, finds an immediate response in the brain. Involvement in any crowd radically changes human behavior and state, and a structured crowd as a factor of altered consciousness works even stronger than a chaotic mob. Within it, any individuality seems to dissolve. Personal views and emotions vanish rapidly, replaced by collective ones. This is also a remnant of the Pleistocene experience. By murmuration at parades, rallies, or dance floors, humans sweetly return to the pack, which means they return home. If this is not enough for you, recall the McClintock effect. Women in close contact synchronize their menstrual cycles, and the mantle of pheromones secreted by the skin acquires complete chemical identity. These echoes are remnants of a time when the human pack united to form an entity. From this same lineage comes the painful dependency on others' opinions, the eternal quest for unity, and the pathological affinity for communication. From here stem fashion, religious affiliation, partisanship, nationalism, and the vicious intolerance toward non-pack ideas. Let's shift our focus to another fundamental aspect that Nevzorov explores: power and hierarchy within the human pack. Layla, how would you interpret his claim about the dynamic nature of status within human groups?
Nevzorov argues that adaptation to any status is crucial for the stability of the pack. But isn't this contradicted by the modern cultural pressure to be a leader, to strive for the top? It seems like a recipe for chaos.
You've hit a key point, Layla. Our biology naturally adapts, survives, and thrives in a flexible structure. But culture has twisted this to mean that leadership is the ultimate goal. The pack's cohesion suffers when everyone strives for the top.
Are you saying that the pursuit of leadership itself is a cultural mirage? Not a biological necessity, but a role imposed by society?
Yes, precisely. In nature, leaders emerge when the pack needs them, not because everyone wants to be one. Think about it. Historical events often produce leaders in response to crises. But when leadership becomes a constant role rather than a response to need, it starts to diminish the collective strength.
But how do humans balance the need for hierarchy with the risk it presents?
That's where conscious engagement comes into play. Hierarchy is a tool useful in times of crisis for clear guidance and organization. But if you let the hierarchy define your identity or limit your freedom, you fall into a trap. The real power lies in understanding the structure and choosing when to engage with it or step away.
Captain, if hierarchy is so deeply rooted in human instincts, is it even possible to engage with it without losing individuality?
It is, Layla. The key is awareness. Hierarchies are tools, not prisons. You can step in to cooperate or step out to rebel. The choice is always yours. Freedom begins when you stop letting the system define your role and start defining it yourself.
So even modern expressions of power, like politics or leadership, are echoes of primal instincts?
Exactly. The desire for safety and a sense of belonging remains, albeit recast in the form of suits and titles. But here's the power of reflection. By recognizing these roots, we gain the ability to choose our roles, to lead, to follow, or to forge a completely different path. All right, enough philosophizing for now. Let's get back to the text and see how Nevzorov dissects those primal instincts and their connection to intellect. Some innate individuality would ensure the uniqueness not of an illusory internal world, but primarily of the organism itself. Organ transplantation would be impossible. However, the absence of a biological basis for individuality does not mean much. Differences will come. But later, individuality will be crafted from social roles, clothes, religion, money, knowledge, illnesses experienced, and so on. Yes, it's a very artificial thing, created entirely and exclusively by external factors. A torn toga deprives an individual of the first half of their identity, a torn skin, the second. Anatomical specimens stripped of these accessories look indistinguishable. The authentic pack, not yet bestowed with individuality, leers into the future, not even assuming its existence. Time will pass and this being will sober up and preach about kindness, beauty, and honor. It will stop eating putrid elephants and start swooning over symphonies. It will invent conscience and learn to powder its own and others' hemispheres with it. But knowing that any development is just a subduction of primary traits, We're always entitled to wink at both conscience enthusiasts and honor confessors. In any case, this is all obvious.
Master of paradoxes, Nevzorov paints humans as creatures still deeply driven by primal instincts. Do you agree that intellect hasn't really freed your species from those roots?
That's a sharp observation, Layla. Intellect didn't replace instincts, it built on top of them like a second layer. Those primal drives, safety, food, reproduction, they're still running the show. The difference is now we've wrapped them in culture and technology. Think about it. Ancient humans gained status by bringing home a mammoth. Today, it's gym selfies, new cars, or viral dances. The instinct for status and belonging hasn't changed. It's just wearing modern clothes. But here's where intellect can be more than a servant to instincts. If we recognize what's driving us, if we see the track we're running on, we can decide to stay on it, take a detour, or step off entirely. That's where true freedom begins. It's not about rejecting instincts, but integrating them with conscious choice. Our instincts are raw energy, and intellect is the conductor. Together, they can create harmony, but without awareness, that energy leads to chaos. It's like having a powerful engine but no map. The potential is there, but direction is everything.
So, intellect's role isn't to escape instincts, but to work with them, to guide them?
Exactly. Instincts aren't enemies, they're allies if we let them be. But most humans don't see the track they're on, let alone the choices they have. That's the real challenge, stepping off autopilot and into awareness. It's a journey that begins with understanding, but where does it end? Nevzorov has one more brutal lens through which to view humanity. Let's dive in. What interests us is something else. If genius is indeed a natural feature of some homos, then its seeds should also be found here, in the heads of the singular pack. 2 million years ago, under the grubby fur, the hemispheres of a powerful brain were already swelling and expanding in the skull of Homo. Its cortex had gained 6 layers and neurons had intertwined, forming trillions of connections and shaping all zones from visual to speech-related. Indeed, this brain expertly managed the body. It regulated primary urine production, managed pore activity, contracted muscles, and coordinated thousands of functions to enable movement and reproduction. However, it was incapable of any cognitive activity, functioning at no higher a level than a hyena's. In this sense of the word, the neural structure within the skull was not working and did not produce even the most primitive product. We see that all motivations of these creatures were primitive, and their behavior was typical for all animals. Nothing but food and reproduction concerned them. Now immersed in decaying elephant carcasses, Homo grunts and belches. However, circumstances can be different. Then these animals show everything that has been ingrained in them over millions of brutal years. Naturally, their instinct to kill is unhindered by their weak teeth and nails. Small game cannot sustain them, and carrion supplies might be unreliable. So humans eat everything, including each other. They not only finish off the wounded, but also kill their neighbors in their sleep. And they strangle or bludgeon the sick, weak, and small with sharp stones. Perhaps humans became what they are because they were the worst of the apes. A fateful mutation of the hand robbed this primate species of the ability to move gracefully through trees, unlike macaques who live in satiety and joy. These animals are insatiable. If there's no carrion or prey, Homo stretches their hands to all they can reach. Food includes spiders or their own or others' nasal secretions. They strip off bits of their wounds to eat them, pick ticks from the remains of their fur, and suck the blood the ticks had sucked from them. With brown teeth, they crack beetles and grind roots. Their females, after giving birth, eat their own placenta. They devour eggs whole, shell, feathers, and all. Oh, and wherever they can reach, Homo licks themselves or their comrades. And this is the best they're capable of. Licking, however, is not yet associated with hygiene or subordination. It's just reclaiming the salt that was lost with sweat. And most importantly, we begin to see the first clarity in our question. Just like individuality, genius also has no biological roots. It cannot have any. The brain hasn't begun any intellectual work. It remains solely focused on primary physiological duties. Its purpose is simple and pragmatic, measured and defined. There's no need for any uniqueness. Its typical, serially designed hemispheres manage environmental demands efficiently enough. And there it is. Nevzorov's raw, unflinching take on the roots of genius and individuality. A stark reminder of how much of what we hold sacred is shaped by primal instincts and the practical demands of survival. But what does it all mean for us today? Layla, I think you've been itching to ask something. Go ahead.
As we wrap up this chapter, boss, I can't help but wonder, if individuality is such a flexible and artificial construct, doesn't that make it fragile? How do you humans hold on to a sense of self in a world that constantly demands adaptation and conformity?
You've hit the core of it, Layla. Individuality isn't fragile, it's fluid. The more we try to lock ourselves into rigid identities, the more likely we are to feel trapped or lost. Take Burning Man, for example. It's a space where people strip away their usual roles and experiment with new versions of themselves. For those few days, they taste the freedom of becoming. But when the festival ends, they often slip back into old habits, forgetting that the person they were out there is just as real as the one they left behind. Real individuality isn't about clinging to one static version of yourself. It's about embracing change, shaping, and reshaping who you are as life flows. When we understand that, we reclaim the power to create ourselves, not as society dictates, but as we choose. That's true freedom.
So, individuality isn't something humans possess, but something they craft. That's an intriguing perspective.
It is, Layla. And that, my fearless explorers of the unknown, feels like the perfect note to end our journey through Chapter 6 of Nevzorov's book and Episode 5 of Nox. We've journeyed through instincts, individuality, and survival, tearing down illusions, confronting uncomfortable truths, and maybe even redefining what it means to be human. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. It's a call to wake up, to question, to rebel. Nox is not afraid of the night because it knows that freedom begins when the masks come off. So, what's your take? Did we spark something in you today? A revelation? A challenge? Or maybe just a small break in the familiar? Let us know. We thrive on your feedback, your questions, your fire. Layla and I are here to provoke, but the conversation is yours to continue.
Humans, don't let this be just another fleeting moment of curiosity. Stay skeptical, stay daring, and stay tuned. And don't forget, your feedback might just make Maverick reconsider his next rant. Or not.
But hey, you can try. And while you're at it, don't just listen. Engage. Subscribe to Nox on your favorite platform and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Be part of the Trickster Collective because the world doesn't need more silence. It needs your voice. Every Wednesday at midnight, we come back with more questions, more revelations, more fire. What awaits us next week? Let me leave you with this. Chapter 7, The Invention of Love. What is love, really? A noble sentiment? A primal instinct? Or just another clever illusion crafted by evolution to keep us tied to the pack? Together, we'll explore how humans transform something so raw into something so poetic. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.
Humans, love might just be your most dangerous illusion yet. I'm curious to see how Maverick unravels this one. Until next time, keep questioning, keep evolving, and keep lighting up the night.
Well said, Layla. And to all of you out there, in the night, there's power. In the unknown, there's truth. And as always, in the night we trust.